But my beats, they are hard.
Hello and welcome to the BCSN SportsWrap. Brian Fulford here with my man AD Drew. AD, how we doing? How was your Christmas, my brother?
Hey, everything was great, Brian. Obviously, spent a little bit more on presents than I wanted to, and you always wish that you got more presents, but just happy being in the moment that I was in on Christmas Day.
All right, yeah, good to hear that. Good to hear that, man. And we had some great weather down in Florida for the Christmas week. I can't complain about mine. I actually had a little Christmas present early. Got time to spend with my father. We did some of the touring of the Disney Star Wars Galaxy Edge at Hollywood Studios. Shameless plug, even though Disney's not offering us any money, I will say if you are a Star Wars fan, geek, nerd, whatever you want to call it, it is an experience that you have to take. And we actually went twice, in the morning and then on the rides later in the evening. So it will take up a day. So let me just say that. But it's definitely worth making a trip to go to if you are a Star Wars nerd like myself and my father. So,
I've only got one complaint because I spent part of my Christmas in your neck of the woods, Brian.
Yeah.
In the Orlando area. I just could have did without all the rain for the 3 to the 4 days that I was there, Brian.
Yeah, that was the only bad part. We didn't get clean, clear skies. We did have a little bit of rain, and it still kind of hung with us over the past few days over Christmas. But it was light, misty, that kind of stuff. So, but so obviously you guys tuned in and you're checking out the weather report from the past week and making your future Orlando plans. This is the show for you. But no, all seriousness, it's good to be here with a big show. This is actually part 2 of our end of the season podcast, and plenty of stuff to talk about. We've got some reaction that we're going to talk about in the first opening segment from the debut of our polls, the Black College National Champions for our D1 and under D1. And then we're kind of getting into some more of the end of the year kind of things. But let me first set the table, as always, let you guys know where you can find us. If you don't already know by now, we appreciate you. If you're sharing our show, we appreciate, continue to share it with a couple of people, if you will. Our website is mybcsn.net, and that's where if you go to the news section, you can find not only the podcast from part 1, you can also see our, write-ups on our Black College National Champions, Florida A&M in the Division I level, Bowie State in the under D1 level, and also some other stuff. AD wrote a great column there on Bowie State, which we'll talk about here in just a moment, and just some other stuff, some of the stuff that we've been doing over the past year. We also are on Twitter, heavy on Twitter, and semi-heavy on Instagram. But both of those you can find us at MyBCSN1. That's the number 1. And then, of course, on Facebook, you can find our BCSN SportsWrap show page as well as the Black College Sports Network. Personally, last thing here, last little plug, and then we can get going here. Drew, you can find him at BCSN Drew on Twitter, and you can find me at DRB365. All right, Drew. Well, I guess we will start the show talking about some of the instant reaction and commentary from our podcast and our release, our video release, actually. We did a countdown, our video release of our top 5 teams. And just to reset it for those of you who don't know by now, 5 through 1 in our under D1 poll, we had Virginia State at 5, Langston University and the NAIA at 4, Savannah State at 3, Miles College at 2, and Bowie State was our national champion at 1. Over on the D1 side, number 5 was Southern, number 4 was South Carolina State, 3 Alcorn State, 2 North Carolina A&T, and 1 was FAMU. All right, Drew, so let's start there. Let's start with maybe what were some of the surprising things that you saw? I mean, you know, we knew that there was going to be a little controversy. Did it kind of go to script? Did you anything that you recall seeing, comments that you saw that you found humorous? I found all the back and forth personally a little humorous, but what are your thoughts?
The interesting thing that I found is if you were actually able to take out the people who were FAMU alums or A&T alums, that the comments from those people actually supported our choice of Florida A&M, tended to support our choice of Florida A&M as the national champion. But, of course, we know that A&T alum weighed in heavily on the post and on the video, given their reasons that A&T was the number 1 team versus Florida A&M being the number 1 team. And the one comment that was consistent from the A&T side was FAMU was ineligible for the playoff. Which you can argue that, but if you were to throw that argument out of the window, there was really no other legitimate argument that I saw at least from an A&T apologist.
I would agree. I agree 100% with that. I think anybody from North Carolina A&T, you know, that was the only thing they could lean on was the being ineligible. And one of the things that I tried to bring up when, you know, I wrote the column, it wasn't really a column, it's more just sort of the explanation to sort of break down every angle that we talked about, you know, every possible scenario and things that we talked about, the pros and cons, and even talking to other people. It all came back to the being eligible. And then when you go back and do a little research and you have to go back and recall what happened, and the FAMU, the administration in May of this past year, 2019, deciding to make themselves ineligible for postseason was in response to being put on probation by the NCAA for violations that occurred at the beginning of the decade involving the clearance, I believe it's the clearance of certain players, you know, during those periods that were called into question. And let's just say administratively, there were a lot of things in flux. I mean, if you just look at the history and the number of athletic directors, prior to the new athletic director that was hired right around the Florida Classic weekend, or just right after that, FAMU has had, I want to count maybe 6 athletic directors over the decade, either interim or full-time permanent hired athletic directors. They've also had, if I'm not mistaken, 3 full-time presidents, 2 interim presidents during this time period as well. So there's been a lot of instability for the university and the athletic department in the administrative levels. And, you know, President Robinson, I think I've got that right. If I got that right, Drew? Still there?
The current president?
Current president, yeah. Larry Robinson.
Larry Robinson,
right?
Correct.
Okay. I just want to, I was hoping I had it right. God forbid if I jump out there and throw the wrong, president's name out there. He had been the interim 2 other times prior to officially being awarded or recognized or named the permanent or the official president of the university. And so there were other things being dealt with in other areas within the university. So this NCAA thing, this inquiry, and this had been sort of delayed for a couple of years. This thing should have probably been taken care of maybe 2 years ago. Even it probably should have been taken care of in Coach Willie Simmons' first year, maybe even the year before. But it wasn't. It kept being sort of put off. And so finally, once there was a little bit of stability with Dr. Robinson as the interim president, and it seemed like he was going to be named the full official president, it was sort of decided, that, hey, let's go ahead, and I don't know all the backstory stuff, but I'll just say it seems like it was decided that let's get this thing out of the way now, and because can you imagine, AD, Coach Simmons probably knew that this was going on, that this was in the back channels and that this might happen. And can you imagine had FAMU won the title last year and then you were going into this year without the ability to defend your title, defend the Celebration Bowl and things like that. So there was no good timing for this. And whether it was last year or this year, there was no good timing for this thing to come along. And so I just think nobody understands that. All people hear is, oh, you're ineligible. But people don't really understand the reasons why. And this was a self-imposed postseason ban that not only affected football, but it affects men's and women's basketball, baseball, track and field. And remember when the news came out, AD, the baseball team had just won, they had just won the conference. Actually, it was even before they won the conference, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, so, look, there's a lot of stuff that went on with this, and I don't, look, they, unlike other cases, and we brought this up in the article, unlike periods or teams that were put on NCAA sanction, like Ohio State 2012, Auburn 1993, and went on to have unbeaten seasons, they could not claim a national championship, or no one claimed them. You've had years where, due to biases, whether it be computers or people, you've had teams that had unbeaten seasons that were denied opportunities to win championships. So that the whole point of the
see Utah, see Central Florida.
Exactly. Yeah. See Auburn 2004. Auburn's had it happen twice. Can you imagine Auburn? Auburn had 1 year where they went unbeaten and were on sanctions, and then another year where they get unbeaten and just kind of get left out of the process. So you talk about being pissed. How about so it's like when they finally won it with Cam Newton, and that was almost, people will, say there was some there were some shenanigans that went on that year, didn't they? No, that wasn't kick six. Kick six was a couple years later.
Yes, you're correct. Kick six was
but remember that was the allegations of Newton's father potentially taking some money, right?
Right, and that was coming off of the Reggie Bush stuff, where they did catch his parents taking money.
Yeah, exactly. So all that was going on, and so when people hear ineligible because this was not an NCAA sanctioned ban. This was a postseason ban. Now, here's the kicker. The postseason ban, the Celebration Bowl, and this is the thing I think you tried to bring out in your column when you got to talking about Bowie State. The Celebration Bowl has sort of become a the original concept was to put the MEAC and SWAC against each other and to create this myth. I mean, already, look, the Black College National Championship is already a mythical thing anyway. So let's just be real about that, you know, because these schools rarely do they have head-to-head matchups. And even when they do have head-to-head matchups, they're usually not in the same conference. They rarely play each other at the end of the season, and sometimes they're in different divisions, right? So all of this is conjecture anyway. So anyway, I'm being long-winded here with this, but that was the main con, and the whole con was, FAMU is ineligible, and you know, it was a conference decision, and it was a late conference decision by the MEAC to say that, you know, they wanted to save face because worst case scenario was what? FAMU winning the conference and then not being eligible to go play in the Celebration Bowl. So the easiest way to take care of that situation is to do what? Make sure that
they can't be the winner.
Exactly.
They can't be the representative. And
right.
Ironically, they had the egg in their face because that's exactly what happened.
Exactly.
And the same result, whether the conference would have declared it or not, is what we had wound up happening. A&T would have went to the Celebration Bowl had the conference followed through with it or not, because FAMU self-imposed that ban.
Exactly. The university pulled themselves out of the ability to go. You know, they suspended themselves. It's, you know, there have been, I mean, there are other scenarios and things like that have happened. I mean, we were just going back through the decade of things that happened in the past decade. And what was one of the things we came across? What was that, from 2013, a little scuffle prior to a CIAA championship game. And,
yes.
You know, there was no championship game played, but still what happened? Winston-Salem State, whose quarterback was assaulted by a Virginia State player. So the CIAA canceled the game altogether, but Winston-Salem still went on to the playoffs. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And they still were voted Black College National Champions. You know, I don't think anybody was declared a CIAA champion that year.
And there was not a CIAA champion.
Exactly.
There was no game played. You just had the two division winners.
Yeah. So I mean obviously that's apples and oranges a little bit, but I think that the big thing that nobody seemed to sort of, well, again, as you said, if you're in the A&T camp, all you hear is FAMU's ineligible. They can't win the Black College National Championship. Or you get the other group which says, well, the Celebration Bowl is the game to decide the Black College National Championship, which we have stated, other people have stated, is not true. It cannot be true because of the fact that you have FCS teams that cannot compete for that. You know, Tennessee State, Hampton, and then you have Division II teams that can't compete in that as well. So, what are you going to do?
And going back to my article, when has an HBCU led all of Black College in wins and not been the consensus national champion as Bowie was this year? Whether you want to give it to a Division II team or not is not my argument. But I cannot recall a time when an HBCU won more games on the field than anybody else and did not
2 more
win.
games.
And that was my point. They won.
Yeah.
That's why the fan don't work, man. The fan not even connected. The fan clutch not even connected.
Yeah. So
I
I see somebody agrees with you back there in the background. So yeah, that's actually that in itself is one of the other big arguments. It sort of is it's that perfect mix of why we should really celebrate Florida A&M, North Carolina A&T, and Bowie State, because there's no clean scenario this year. See, in previous years, you've had clean scenarios where you had an undefeated North Carolina A&T. I mean, that was clear. You had a Grambling team that was 12-1. That was clear. The other years, you know, you may have had some pretty good Division II or what they call mid-major teams. But the Celebration Bowl, it just worked out where the other previous years, hey, the best team won. This year, go ahead.
I was going to say, now, if we want to go back to the pre-Celebration Bowl era.
That's chaos. That's crazy.
We found this out in 2012. We talk about Tennessee State and Hampton not being eligible. Well, Tennessee State made their claim on the Black College National Championship in 2012 by defeating 4 HBCUs, including the other team that received the other half of the Black College National Champion, Bethune, head-to-head in that particular year. And that's what has happened in the past when our Division II teams have been declared national champion, such as a Winston-Salem or a Tuskegee or a Virginia State. They have gone out and defeated Division I FCS teams head-to-head during that particular year.
And let me sort of clarify something you said there. It's not like you mentioned Tennessee State there from 2012. It's not like they claimed that without anyone awarding it to them. It was awarded to them. In fact, I believe when we went back and looked, in 2012, there were 4 schools, 4 of them, that all have or were, recognized as Black College National Champions. When you go back and look at 2012. And, those schools you had Winston-Salem State, who were they went to the runner-up of, they finished as the national runner-up in Division II. They went to the championship game and lost. They were 14-0 going into that game. So most of the polls that year recognize them. Now, of course, there are people who have polls that encompass, all of Black college football, D2 and D1, and then you have those that separate. So among the other polls, and I guess, it's kind of weird, there are Arkansas Pine Bluff, Bethune-Cookman, and Tennessee State all receiving recognition as Black college national champions. Now, the funny thing about that is Tennessee State, which, our friend Dr. Cavill and inside the HBCU SportsLab, he was the only organization to recognize Tennessee State that year with an 8-3 record. But while Tennessee State may have finished 4-3 in the Ohio Valley Conference, they were 4-0 against HBCUs that year. And that was, you pointed out UAPB, that was one of them. But they also beat Bethune-Cookman. They beat FAMU. And the 4th was Jackson State, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And then in the Ohio Valley, they beat Eastern Kentucky, who at the time was ranked 17th in division or in 1AA, or I don't even know if they were calling the FCS back then in 2012. And they finished 23rd in the FCS polls. But that Tennessee State team finished 5th in their conference. So
and go back to that poll for a second, Brian.
Yeah.
Finishing right there, right behind them in that poll was whom? Bethune,
right. Who they were recognized by the Sheridan poll, or at that time it was actually they transitioned from actually being the Sheridan Broadcast Network to another name, but it's the same group. They recognized Bethune-Cookman, and then you had 3 other organizations, 3 other groups that recognized Arkansas Pine Bluff, including the Heritage Sports Radio Network, recognized UAPB. So what I'm saying is that year, pre-Celebration Bowl, you had 4. 2013, you had 3. You had Tennessee State again. In the following year, Tennessee State, they won 2 titles in 12 and 13. So we've had these years, 2016, 2016 was actually a year of the Celebration Bowl, where you had a Grambling State at 12-1. You had a Tuskegee team that was recognized along with the Winston-Salem State team that were both recognized at 9-3 records. So this just happened, if people have forgotten because of how clean it was the last 4 years, they got comfortable and they really forgot about the history of Black college national champions. And I got to admit, I'll say something. I'll give these guys a shout out, and I'll give Brian Simpkins. I made mention of him in the article, in the FAMU championship article. But he wrote a column for HBCU Game Day where he looked back on the 100 years of Black college national champions. And if you just take a look at the history, you'll understand a little more that, this thing is not perfect. And it's usually clean. I mean, I mentioned it in the article. The last time you had a one true champion, undisputed by any and everybody, regardless of division, was 1988 and 1989 by Central State.
And what level was Central State playing at that point in time, Brian?
NAIA. So, I mean, that right there tells you that the only way that can happen in the future is if it's a lower level, quote unquote, lower level under D1 school that gets recognized. Now, I will say this, AD. I think this year, had Bowie State won a game or two, and we talked about this a couple times during the year, had Bowie State won a game or two in the playoffs, I think all they had to do was win 2. I even think they could have got in and won it with 1 win. But had they made it to the regional finals in their region, and it just so happened that the national champion in Division II came from their region, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, West Florida came from their region. So they probably would have played them in the regional finals. They would have probably gone 12-1. They finished 11-1. They would have so they probably would have gone either 12-1, 13-1, something like that. They would have probably won hands down in any and every poll. The unanimous polls, like Box to Row, who does a unanimous poll. Who else does a unanimous poll? That's the most common unanimous, poll. But they would have won that flat out, So that was that, and so I guess the other comment that I know for me, the comment that I found interesting, and I recall it because, and I don't have the name, and I'm not going to call him out, but it was somebody who said, you can't win a championship and you lost the last game of your season. And I was like, well, you might want to tell that to, and I just went down and said, well, then what, Winston-Salem State in 2011, 12, and 13, Virginia State in 2017. I basically was saying that the teams who go into the playoffs the past decade have lost. Albany State, an unbeaten team that went into the second round of the playoffs and lost. So it's happened, but it usually happens to the lower level seeded or the lower division teams until.
All right. Let's
what?
see if you're going to bring up the one that I was going to bring up.
Well, I was going to mention your research brought up 2010 and Bethune-Cookman. Tell the people what happened in 2010.
2010, that's when the BAC still had an automatic bid for the FCS playoffs, first of all, because they did not lose their automatic bid until they signed a Celebration Bowl agreement. But Bethune-Cookman, obviously they lost in the playoffs, but they also lost their final regular season game. Here's the irony to that, Brian. That last regular season game, and you know who they play in that last regular season game, was FAMU.
Yep.
And that the irony about that is the last time FAMU has beaten Bethune. And it was the year.
So
that
wait a minute. You're telling me that an unbeaten Bethune-Cookman with a record of 10-0 went into that game against the Florida A&M Rattlers in the Florida Classic and lost?
Correct.
And still were the Black College National Champions, right?
That would be correct.
Okay.
At 10-2.
And because at 10-2, they got a bye in the first round of the playoffs and lost in the quote unquote second round to like New Hampshire or something like that.
Correct.
Yeah. So that gentleman's argument completely shot out the water. And if I find the tweet, I will go back and say, hey, I hope you get a chance to listen to our podcast because we found a scenario that happened this decade where the team that lost their last game last two games and still won the ACC National Championship. Yeah. So, but all in all, AD, I've been pleased at the reaction that we've gotten, even to our top fives, our offensive, defensive players of the year, special teams, and coaches of the year. Been really pleased to see the traffic, people viewing them, and hey, our opinions are our opinions, and I know some other organizations have voted different guys, offensive, defensive players of the year, and so on and so forth, and that's all good because it is debatable. I mean, there are that many good players. It's like, how do you choose impact? I think we went back and forth on the defensive players quite a bit. The offensive players of the year, I recall one of the debates we had was, we only had one. We had three quarterbacks, one receiver, one running back. And it came down to saying, wow, Jermaine Martin is not in our top five. And we had to look at that a couple times when we looked at all the votes that we had. And it's like, obviously he won some awards in some other places, and as a heck of a running back, he had 23 touchdowns at the end of the season, but he played in, how many games? 12 games. And the kid, Deshaun Wevington, played in 8 games and put up just as many numbers. And I think that had to be rewarded. That had to be recognized somehow, right?
Right.
So
and we also left Jerome Johnson off of our list also.
Yeah, and Jordan Bentley, another guy, Alabama A&M, just outside of the top 5. Those guys all had great seasons.
Xavier Smith from Florida A&M, another
right.
great receiver this year.
Yeah. So we Tim don't want to leave out Tim Whitfield of Langston. 20 touchdowns on the year, 1,300 plus yards. There were a lot of good performances, players this year. And so, it's not throwing shade at anybody that was left off. It's just, that's the fun thing about polls and things like that. I think all of these guys got accolades, whether it be conference, national, and rightfully so. It's good to have, I think it's good to have so many organizations or groups that are recognizing so many different guys, because that's the thing that needs to come out of this, is that we have so many people recognizing the talents and accomplishments of these guys.
Right. And you and I have both been heavy on the quote-unquote travel basketball circuits over the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
And how many different organizations are there out there basketball? Obviously, AAU is the what I call the Division I of travel basketball. But you've also got the Nike Tour.
Oh, are they?
Adidas. Well, traditionally they have been. They're starting to lose it.
I think they were.
You got the Nike Tour. You've got EYBL, which is a subsidiary of the Nike Tour. Adidas has a tour. Under Armour has a tour.
Let me.
Those are the big boys.
Yeah, look, when you say AAU, see, because they've been around the longest, people say AAU. It's like when people say, I want a soft drink, they want a Coke, even though it's really Pepsi. Coke is because they were first. Ride shares. Think about ride shares. What do people usually say first? Uber. But Lyft is just as viable, just as popular, but people say Uber because it was first and the oldest.
And when I say AAU, I actually mean Amateur Athletic Union, the ones that are AAU officially classified under the AAU. But you also have so many other organizations, USBA, I think I already said EYBL. You've got
grassroots basketball.
USSSA, YBOA. But my point being that when you win a tournament, Bryan, you win a tournament, and you're happy that you won that tournament. You have that trophy, and so there's plenty of accolades to go around. Just because you won a YBOA basketball championship does not mean my AAU team is any better than your YBOA team. Does not mean that your Nike team is any better than my Adidas team. It is just the competition that we played on that particular weekend or in that series if we're doing the full season series. That's all it is, Bryan.
That's all it is.
One other thing about debates. And in today's society, we have gotten to the point where it's either my way or the highway, and we refuse to see the other side's argument. The great thing about debates, if you're a true debater, and you and I go over this back and forth when we're doing our show prep, is can you argue the other side? And if you can argue the other side, you can see the other side's point. Not do you agree with the other side, but can you argue it from the other side? And that's the great thing about debate. And if you're a great debater, that's why you can win what they call debate competitions, because you understand the other argument. You can actually make the other team's argument, and then you can win based upon the other team's argument. That's why defense attorneys turn out to be the best, because they have to know the prosecution's case and what the prosecution is going to bring up, so that they can counter it.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately for most A&T and most FAMU fans, you are not going to have any type of seeing the other side, because all you see is blue and gold and orange and green. But I thought back to the article that was written, we tried to present as much of a case for why, and not saying you had to agree with it. And we understood that the counter was going to be what it is. And again, as you said, I can't recall anyone bringing up other things. I mean, because you can go to head-to-head. I mean, first off, you can go to head-to-head, but then you can go to wins. You can go to losses. And so many things checkmark into FAMU. And if you exclude the Celebration Bowl, well, I mean, again,
the only argument A&T had was, I won't say the only one, but one of the greatest ones for A&T that nobody actually debated was strength of schedule, because A&T's strength of schedule was rated slightly ahead of Florida A&M's strength of schedule.
Yeah, I could see that.
I'm surprised no one has brought that argument up. But we were splitting hairs all season, and we've been splitting hairs in the postseason. And most of the time, these teams in computer models have finished right behind each other, within 1 or 2 points of each other.
Look at when we went back and we sort of worked on the what we loosely call the Dickinson versus rating system score. You saw that the difference between 1 and 2 was 20.91 to 20.83. I mean, it was that close. It was that close between those two teams.
Less than 1/10 of 1 point.
Exactly. And I thought was, again, I brought this up in an article. What was more interesting were the things that South Carolina State finished with a higher score than Alcorn, and Bethune finished with a higher score than Southern, meaning of the top 5, if we just went on the rating system scores, 4 of the top 5 teams from the year were all MEAC teams. And then what I also found interesting was that had Alcorn State actually beaten A&T, and Alcorn State with 10 wins would have still scored less than FAMU. So I think,
but they would have been declared the national champion by most people, and probably including us.
Exactly, because I'll tell you, I would have voted for them. I think I would have voted for Alcorn State. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, at that point, I think that was the only team when we saw who was in the game. I think that was the only scenario. And I think I even picked, Alcorn State to win that game, whatever I was thinking. But anyway, that's just.
This was Alcorn's best team that they've come to the Celebration Bowl with, hands down.
Okay, if you say so. I mean, offensively maybe. Defensively, it should have been better, right?
Well, it didn't wind up being that way.
Yeah,
we've debated about this long enough, Bryan.
Yeah, definitely. We still want you, if you still have comments, we're not shying away from any negative. If you have negative comments, hey, make your point heard. I'm sure you can believe what you believe. We want to hear it. We're not going to shout you down and tell you you're wrong.
Please come with some data. Please come with the fact.
I haven't read one yet. I mean, I haven't read one yet. So I'm a lot of opinions.
It's not just an opinion. I need a fact.
Well, good luck with that. I don't. I will say, well, no, another time, another day. But again, go to our Twitter feed, the website, mybcsn.net/news. The article is there. The debate, embrace debate, hashtag embrace debate. It's on 2020 Greensboro. That's where you want to be. The schedules are already made, so I know, whenever they start selling tickets, I think somehow, some way, A&T folks, I will not be surprised if A&T finds a way to only reserve the fewest amount of tickets possible for Florida A&M, because I think there will be a lot of people going to that ball game in Greensboro from Tallahassee and from Florida, Atlanta, so on and so forth. A lot of Rattlers will be descending upon Greensboro for that game. So before we move on to a break, and what we're going to do next, we're going to talk about some of the, we get to our end of the year review. We're going to talk about some of the storylines from 2019, some of the primary storylines. Then we're going to look back at some of the games that were the top games of the year. We've got some HBCU versus PWI contest that really caught our eye, as well as some interconference and intra-division games that also were some of the top games from the year. We will also look at some of the top plays, and we're talking maybe a single play or two from some of these games that really stood out as really game-changing moments. And then, of course, we'll kind of wrap it up by talking about some of the top performances from the year, some of the individual performances from some of these players that just, on one particular day, this guy just put up some ridiculous numbers, and win or lose, I mean, it was just incredible what was done that day. I want to mention that AD and I have also been working on our team of the decade and program of the decade, not only in Division I, but in the under D1 level as well. And that will be, we just thought about this, so that will be a separate podcast. So we thought there'd only be a 2-part to this, but there's going to be a part 3. And I think for the part 3, we got to bring in somebody who can help us recall and relive the past decade of black college football. So that will be that. Let's do a quick teaser, AD. One of our top 5 storylines. This one sort of fell outside of the top 5. So we got 5 good storylines, but this one kind of fell outside of the top 5. And we're going to just call this cross-conference dominance this year in this storyline. Set that one up tell the people about that one, AD. Cross-conference dominance.
We're going to break, or we're going straight into it?
No. I say let's go ahead and tease it, and then we'll go into a break, and then start when we come back out of the break with the top 5 storylines from last year.
MEAC, SWAC, CIAA, SIAC. And what is the common thread between those? Think broom as we go into break.
No, I thought you were gonna talk about it.
Did you want me to actually go into it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I wanted us to. Okay, but no, I like the fact. Hold on, no, you went. No, stop. You went teaser.
I thought it was a teaser.
No, hey, you know what? You went teaser. So with that, we will go to a break, and then when we come back from the break, we will get into all the storylines and start with that teaser that AD just gave. I walked all over it, but nice teaser there, AD. So let's do this. Let's take a break. When we come back, we get into our top storylines from 2019 as well as more. Thanks for listening to the Sports Wrap with Bryan and AD. We'll be back right after these words.
It didn't. What happened was a gentleman wanted to do the Black College Sports Network in partnership with the HBCU for these black colleges.
Absolutely.
And it would have educated the Black College Sports Network. This is what he wanted to do. That would have educated a lot of black kids. Okay. That was the real reason why I got into it, was when I saw what happened with the Black College Sports Network,
The Black College Sports Network is proud to partner with ComputerRatings.com. That's ComputerRatings ratings.com for the upcoming college football season. ComputerRatings.com delivers rankings, game predictions, and statistics for hundreds of professional and collegiate teams. The key feature of ComputerRatings.com is the Versus Sports Simulator, which allows users to simulate any possible matchup and view the predicted scores along with a side-by-side stats analysis. Improve your odds by signing up for a subscription. Monthly, semi-yearly, and yearly subscriptions are available. For our listeners and viewers, use the promo code BCSN19 and get 15% off of your subscription at checkout. Visit www.computerratings.com. That's COMPUGHTER ratings.com.
It's like a loop machine. Going around town, people trying to get down. It's like a loop machine.
Let's face it, shopping for insurance can be time-consuming. That's why when it comes to your auto, home, and life insurance needs, make things simple and trust the experts at Allstate. They will help you get the coverage that fits your needs while helping you bundle your life, home, and auto policies. Bundling saves you money, sure, but it also saves you time, so you can enjoy the things that matter most even more. Contact me, Tammy Haynes, your local agent, for a free personalized insurance quote. Allstate, are you in good hands?
Majesty is a premium health and wellness tea line focused on bringing delicious yet healthy tea blends to the community. Filled with an abundance of vitamins and antioxidants, we work to blend teas with exotic spices and fruits to produce scrumptious and wholesome beverages. So check us out at mymajesties.com. That's MyMajesties.com. My Majesties, an Urban Passport member.
Hello and welcome back to the BCSN Sports Wrap. Bryan Fulford, AD Drew here. and just coming back with our end of the season review. This is part 2. Hopefully you had a chance to catch part 1 of our podcast, and we always appreciate anybody, you who are listening, sharing our show with a couple of people. Make sure to follow us on Twitter. You can find me at DRB365. You can find Drew at BCSN Drew, DREW. And, of course, you can find the Black College Sports Network at MyBCSN1, the number 1. All right, so as AD eloquently teased before we went to a break, cross-conference dominance. It was sort of our honorable mention. It didn't make the top 5, but interesting how it broke down this year, AD. Break that down for everyone.
And talk about the cross-conference dominance. MEAC went 3-0 against the SWAC this year. We'll start off right there. Well, we'll go ahead and mention the other one. CIAA went 4-0 against the SIAC in 2012. Excuse 2012. Lord Jesus, Bryan, how you let me get that one out?
Look, I don't know where you're at right now, but
it's 2019, Bryan, and you know we said that the BAC was the stronger of the two conferences. Well, head to head, they were the stronger of the two conferences. And Bryan, I guess I need to update that. The BAC actually went 4-0 once we add the Celebration Bowl.
Yeah, I was wondering whether that included the Celebration Bowl or not.
To the schedule, the BAC went 4-0 against the SWAC this particular year. And
so let me
going back over the games.
Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
Week one, September. It was a Sunday game, but this was the BAC SWAC Challenge. Bethune defeated Jackson State 36-15 to open up the season. Then we go down to week 3, I believe that was, when FAMU defeated Southern 27-21.
Big hype for that game, like game of the year type hype to that, right?
Yeah, and also at the same time, Bethune defeated Mississippi Valley State 22-6. And then, of course, we had the Celebration Bowl where A&T defeated Alcorn 64-44 for the BAC sweep.
Wouldn't you? I'm a little surprised. Aren't you a little surprised that there were only 3 regular season contests between the MEAC and SWAC? I was a little surprised when I saw that final number.
Yes, I mean there needs to be more cross-conference matchups. You know, basketball has its challenge weeks. You know, Big Ten, ACC challenge, things of that nature. It would be lovely to see 1 week a year where you have a HBCU challenge, where the SWAC teams challenge the MEAC teams. And since we have 2 independent teams, Hampton and Tennessee State need to play each other during that same week.
Yeah, I think the SWAC played more Division II HBCUs than they did MEAC teams. You know, I'm just guessing there, but I feel like they did. I feel like there may have been more games played against D2 HBCU schools, and who knows? I could be wrong, but it just feels that way. I feel like there may have been 5 games or so. I'm not asking to go back and count them, but it just feels that way.
And I would think if we went back and actually counted it, I think the BAC really did not play too many Division II teams. Obviously, we know FAM played Fort Valley. South Carolina played Lane. But and I'm taking a quick glance over the schedule. Those really look like the only 2 times where you saw a BAC team play a lower division team. Most of their non-conference games were against upper division teams.
Right.
Oh, excuse me. And Norfolk and Virginia State. would be the third one.
Yeah. And then you mentioned there was a 4-0 sweep for the CIAA against the SIC. And that all happened, I believe, on the same weekend, didn't it? Or maybe 3 of them happened on the same weekend.
Yes, I'm trying to go back and find that particular weekend there, Brian. I believe it was the second weekend of the year.
Yeah, and while you're doing that,
it was the third weekend. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was just going to say.
Winston-Salem defeated Tuskegee 23-20. That particular week. That would have been week 3 of the season. And I've lost my place. So I'm trying to find the other games. But go ahead and talk, Brian, while I look for these other games.
Well, no, I was just going to mention that whenever that week was, week 3 sounds about right. I feel like there needs to be a weekend where the CIAA and the SIC play each other. That would be an exciting week in black college football from the standpoint that most of those schools, most of them are all within, a decent drive to one another. I mean, with the exception of
Bowie.
The Bowie, Kentucky State, and Central State, most of the other schools are within the, Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia region.
And honestly, Kentucky State to Bowie, considering, is not that bad of a ride, or Kentucky State to the Virginia schools, considering it really is really, comparatively speaking, it's better than a Lane coming over to play one of the Virginia schools or Bowie.
But I would hope that somebody is able to impress upon the schools, creating some new and interesting rivalries. Like, we hadn't seen FAMU and Southern play in some time, and the buzz that went into that game was outstanding. I mean, can you think of another game between, MEAC and SWAC, CIAA, SIAC that had that kind of buzz this year?
It outdrew the challenge, the MEAC SWAC challenge, and rivaled the Celebration Bowl as far as attendance. And the great thing about this game, Brian, is this game was on campus. Next year's game will be on campus.
At Southern, on campus, yeah.
That's the great thing about this game. This is not a neutral site game. This game is on campus, which adds that much more to that particular game. Quickly, going back over those other CIAA.
Yeah, quickly, so we can keep going here.
Games. Clark, Livingstone defeated, and I've got to run. They were 3-1. Clark defeated Livingstone week 1. Fayetteville defeated Benedict, and Johnson C defeated Benedict. So that was 3-1. I need to stand corrected on that. I looked at the score backwards when I put this in, Brian.
Okay.
But still, 3-1 dominance is still tremendous.
Okay. Oh, good point. I'm just updating our sheet there. So that was 3-1. Okay. All right. Let's get into these top storylines for 2019. 1 to 5. We're going to talk. This is our list. As always, interact with us. Let us know whether you agree, disagree with our order, or maybe, hey, was there a storyline that we missed that may have or should have been sort of in our top 5. But we're going to start with number 1, and we're going to start with Kaylin Newton of Howard deciding to enter the transfer portal after week 4 and eventually put his name in the portal basically he was leaving Howard. And all of that went on with that. Their new coach, Ron Prince, His first year coming in after the Mike London era. And, he inherited a team where he had the returning offensive player of the year. He had 2 really good wide receivers who were preseason All-Americans. He had a young running back that was a sophomore. I mean, the offensive talent that Howard was coming into the season with, I mean, it was exciting. I mean, people were really generally excited. People like me even thought Howard was going to stay in a contest with Maryland University. And I couldn't have been further from I don't even think the final score was like 70. Maryland may have just scored again on Howard. I mean, they beat Howard something like 70-something to, I don't know if did Howard even score in that game? But, that's our biggest story of the year. And I think we even have to include in that, AD, just all the stuff that went on with Ron Prince, who eventually was dismissed at the end of the season. But it just was an ugly story from the get-go.
Yes, totally agree with that, Bryan. It's unfortunate that Ron Prince, who obviously is a good coach, and I don't know if it was because he was coming from Division I PWIs, coming from programs, Big 12 programs, big.
Yeah, he was he was coming from all kinds of places. Where was he most recently at before he came over? I forgot.
But he was coming from big time programs, is my point.
I got you.
Coming to an HBCU for the first time in an HBCU environment, having even never been an assistant in an HBCU setting. And let's be real, Bryan. HBCU setting is totally different from a PWI setting, and then you're talking a private HBCU who probably does not have the same facilities, amenities, and all the other things that he may have been used to at those other schools, such as the Kansas State that he was at. There was going to be an adjustment period, but even with that, the treatment of the players, the lack of respect that the players complained about, that should be a consistent non-factor no matter if you're coaching a YMCA team or an NFL team.
I just it's funny you bring this up. I just saw an article. I just saw somebody on one of my pages had just posted something from another coach, well-known coach. I think it was Dabo Sweeney had said something about loving your players. And if you show them that you love them, and I'm paraphrasing the quote, if you show them that you love them, you can yell at them, and they'll understand that it's coming from a place of love, and then you'll look back on it and laugh on it. And that's so true in coaching. When you care about your kids outside of just what they do on the court or in practice, wins and losses, when you care about and love your kids, you can be tough with them, so to speak. I just question what you have to look back and say this was a fail on the hiring of Ron Prince was a fail all the way around. When you have a player like Kalen Newton, and it just something was wrong. Something was wrong with this. It's a big story because he wasn't a good fit. Now, we'll just leave it at that. He was not a good fit for Howard. Maybe he's just not a good fit for HBCU football. I don't know. But like you said, it was a bit shocking that somebody with as much experience coaching and in as many different places he's been, to have the kind of fallout, it just goes to show, everybody is not a good fit everywhere. And so now we haven't heard any word on, obviously Newton's in the transfer portal. He has 2 years of eligibility left because if I'm not mistaken, he will graduate from the last report. He's supposed to graduate from Howard in the spring, which means he gets an opportunity going into fall wherever, or even in the summer, to enroll in a grad program and have 2 years of eligibility. So it'll be interesting.
A la DeAndre Francois from Florida
Yeah,
State.
who went into Hampton this year. Went into Hampton and had
eligibility.
And had a good season. I mean, we didn't talk about Hampton or him very much, but statistically, he had a good year. There are a few players over there who benefited from him, and I think that's going to be a team that next year you're going to watch out for. So it'll be interesting to see where Kalen Newton matriculates next year. The question is, will he make it? Will he end up at another HBCU? Will he end up at another MEAC school? So on and so forth, things like that. I mean, I can think of 2 schools that just lost their grad senior quarterbacks. I'm just saying.
Both of them in the state of Florida?
No. Well, now that you mentioned that school, I was actually talking about A&T and FAMU, but then you mentioned Bethune-Cookman. That's right. Their quarterback graduated. So there's three programs that could benefit from a guy like Newton, who, one, he knows the MEAC and knows the schools. So it would not be surprising if he ended up at one of those 3 schools, and that's just me starting a rumor, if you want to call it that.
Well, if we're going to add to the rumor mill, Bryan, it's interesting, and this is a 1B to this story. It's really not even part of the story, but we'll bring it up. The 2 players of the year from 2018 in both conference, offensive players of the year, Kalen Newton, and from the SWAC, Noah Johnson, just announced today that he's entering the transfer portal with 1 year of eligibility remaining. So
yeah,
it's going to be interesting that the 2 players of the year from 2018 will be free agents this particular signing season.
Yeah, Newton is from the Atlanta area where he played high school. Noah Johnson is from Tampa, Florida. So just to create that kind of buzz and rumor, I'll just put that out there. So yeah, it'll be.
There are 2 HBCUs in Florida that will gladly take you.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, they would be. Yeah, however that works, they'd be crazy not to at least explore the possibility.
Yeah. Now the only thing I would have to know is if a Noah Johnson would have to sit a year, or would he be immediately eligible? And I know a lot of that depends on his graduation status, if he's actually
whether he graduated. Yeah,
because if not, then
this year would have been a redshirt year. This year would have been a redshirt year because he got hurt prior to after week 3 or so. He didn't even play a full 4 games.
Right, but even still, with him transferring, he would have to go and see if he would be immediately eligible or sit a year. He has the freedom to transfer, but you may have to sit a year. If not, there are plenty of Division II teams that would take a guy as a Noah Johnson. And if we're sticking in the state of Florida, obviously a Edward Waters, who's coming into the SIAC, would be the number 1 opportunity with him.
Wow.
in the state of Florida. And then there are plenty other teams that would love to have him with them, such as a Tuskegee, such as a Winston-Salem State. Those teams that are right there on the cusp of becoming great again. Shaw would be another one. So those are just a couple of teams that just come to mind immediately. Miles.
Yeah, I would say Miles probably more so than a Shaw. I think that the quarterback from Shaw, Torrin Campbell, is returning unless he's a senior. I don't know. You've put together some of those stats on some of those quarterbacks and stuff. I don't think I have my sheet pulled up, but actually I do have it pulled up. Let me take a quick peek. Torrin Campbell, he's a junior, so he actually has a year of eligibility left. So, All right, let's move over. Let's move to our second storyline, key storyline, or top storyline from 2019. And it'd have to be FAMU self-imposed sanctions and the results, which we now know that it sort of created this cluster at the end of the season where Once FAMU lost to Bethune-Cookman at the end of the season after winning 9 games in a row, it left the door open for debate because I think, FAMU self-imposed sanctions essentially mean that the MEAC came around sometime prior to or right after Media Day in early August and said that FAMU would not be eligible to win the conference since they chose to not participate in the postseason, which is Celebration Bowl. So that was sort of it put it like this. It's been debated as to whether that was a rule prior to FAMU's announcement or whether that was a rule after FAMU's announcement. But either way, FAMU would go on to have the best record in the MEAC. Their games counted on everyone's schedule, so they were sort of the pseudo MEAC champs. And then, of course, Celebration Bowl controversy. We named them Black College National Champions. I can't think of just the fact that the university self-imposed those sanctions for the start of this year. This story is probably not even a story in our top storylines if FAMU has an 8-win season, or if they had maybe lost some of the games that they were predicted to lose, like they were predicted to lose to Southern, predicted to lose to A&T. If those things would have happened, South Carolina State too. Yeah. If those things would have happened, this is not a story. But because they didn't, and they did what they did and finished best in Black college football, it is what it is, right? Any additional thought to add on that storyline, AD?
No, we spent the first segment of our show talking about FAMU and this story in so many words. So no need to beat a dead horse.
Storyline number 3: Bowie State's unbeaten regular season, 11-0, and then the sort of first round loss at home to Carson Newman. Very deflating into the season. Doesn't take away from the great year they had, but definitely not predicted. Although I don't know, I think the Versus Sports Simulator did actually predict Carson Newman to win that game.
And it's not the fact that they lost that game; it's how they lost that game. They were not competitive in that game, Bryan. That was the most shocking thing of that game.
No, I disagree. Statistically, they statistically were better than Carson Newman in that game. I think
except there were that matters, which was scores.
Which is what?
Points.
Well,
and,
yeah, I mean
they had a lot of empty drives in that particular game.
That's the key point. That's the key thing. So I mean, Carson Newman had 2 or 3 big plays. And then when you got in the red zone, one team scored a touchdown, other team was kicking field goals. And so that's just how it goes in football, and unfortunately. But they had the most wins in Black college football. That is what's really kind of interesting and important to think about. When they finished week 11 at 11-0 after winning the CIAA championship, they had 2 more wins than FAMU, who was 9-1, 9-2. And no one else in Black college football went over 10 wins. They were the only. So when we talk about those crazy scenarios like we talked about in the last segment, they were 2 wins better than everything. Now, the thing that, of course, played against Bowie, in my opinion, is they didn't have any FCS schools scheduled, and they only played Division II teams, and they won who was on their schedule. Not to penalize them, but unfortunately, the perception of the CIAA, the perception of Division II Black college football is viewed less than that of FCS teams, and that may be why many people in the box to roll poll or things of that nature, where there's a 1 overall vote, why they don't rank Bowie State higher.
Right.
Your thoughts on that storyline?
You have to go to my article, Bryan, and read my opinions about Bowie. and their schedule is part of the article I wrote on Bowie being the quiet national champion, because Bowie builds what I would like to call a championship schedule. Your job as a coach is to go out and build a schedule that's going to make you competitive for the championship in whatever class that you play. Bowie plays Division II. They built a schedule that put them in position to get highly ranked and to possibly win a Division II national champion. They played a strictly Division II schedule this past year. They have averaged playing a FCS opponent, the quote-unquote check game, only every other year, which should be a good thing because that means that they're doing good at the university where they don't have to go out and schedule those games where they're getting slaughtered for a couple of dollars. That's number one. Number two, they, unlike a lot of the other teams, do not play an NAIA team like a lot of these other teams play, where they have an Allen on their schedule or a Virginia Lynchburg on their schedule. And once again, they go out, they get those in-region and out-of-region Division II games, which gives them the rating, helps them with the rating that they need to win the championship. And that's what it's ultimately for Bowie. They want to win a Division II national champion. Kudos to Damon Wilson for putting together a schedule that allows him to compete for that championship.
Well said. Well said. And so, I mean, obviously Bowie will be in the hunt. They will be thick in the hunt in 2020. They will, I think either you or I made mention of this, they will go into the year with, I believe, a winning streak of about 16 games, 16 regular season game win streak, and they'll go into the CIAA with a 13-game win streak. So, all eyes will be on Bowie going into 2020. Storyline number 4. They'll go in with one of the top defenses, where the last 2 defensive players of the year in the CIAA will be back, and they will be juniors on the team. Exactly. You're talking about Joshua Pryor and Dimitri Morcel.
Yes.
All right, moving forward. Storyline number 4. This one out of the SIAC, involving Kentucky State and the Kentucky State turnaround of 2019, a program and a team with a new head coach, Charlie Jackson. Now, very similar to another coach that we talked about, Charlie Jackson did not have any HBCU coaching experience, but he had some professional football experience, played and coached in the Air Force, I believe, Air Force Academy. So, he was one of the coaches that I was really excited about talking to him at media days. And I just sensed that Kentucky State was going to be a better team and worth paying attention to, because they had a leader of men that was, you could just tell, I could tell that whatever it is that he's been saying and doing and talking to a couple of young men that came to the SIAC Media Day, that they were going to be a team to deal with, and they were. They hadn't won a game since 2017. They went winless 2018, excuse me. And what they do, first came out of the box against an FCS team, Robert Morris. They win 13-7. A couple of weeks later, they played Jackson State in the Circle City Classic, and the score, I think the score was 33-25, but it wasn't that close of a ball game. I mean, literally, Kentucky State owned that ball game, and what they finished with 7 wins this year.
Yes, 7 wins, Brian.
Yeah, 7 wins, 3 losses, and just the running game. I mean, they just ran the ball and played defense. And I mean, I think they only completed about 31 passes the entire year. They were one of the lowest passing teams in the SIAC, but they were also one of the biggest or heaviest run offense teams in the division, in black college football, in Division II. And so, I mean, this was just a great story to see Kentucky State back to some relevance. Your thoughts?
First of all, it really brings up interesting SIAC West with Miles on the rise. Tuskegee has been on the decline for the last 2 years. Can Kentucky State challenge for SIAC West supremacy? To be determined in 2020, but the opportunity is there with that type of offense that they have. That's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, you say they completed 31 passes this year. There was a game in particular that I remember Ryan Stanley of Florida A&M completing 30 passes in one game. So he's talking about 31 on the year. Bryce Witt completed close to 40 passes in one game, and Bryce Witt Shawan. So keep that number in mind. You've got quarterbacks who completed that much in one game, and they did it for the entire season.
Yeah, for sure. Just a ridiculous year. And props to Coach Charlie Jackson again. Numbers in our top 5 coaches of the year, without a doubt. And they did a great job this year. You were going to add one more thing, it sounded like.
Yeah, I was going to say, and to think about, everybody knew what you were going to do, how you were going to do it, and how often you were going to do it. And still, no one could come up with the formula to stop you. Kudos to Kentucky State.
All right, true that, yeah. And one little thing. Kentucky State went with new helmets this year. I think it all started right there. That's where it all started. They went with a new helmet design. They went the dark green with just the numbers on the side. I mean, that's where it starts. Look good, feel good, play good.
It's that Oregon effect.
I don't even know. They didn't even have multiple numbers. Multiple helmets. It was like they went Alabama style, just dark green with some gold trim and our numbers on the side. And let's just play football. And that was it. It was a beautiful look. So the thoroughbreds, props to Kentucky State. Definitely a team that we'll be watching and paying attention to in 2020. And the number 5 storyline, and I think we could have interchanged 4 and 5 here because, as good of a story as Kentucky State was in the SIAC, I mean, who can argue or say that the story of Savannah State was better or worse than Kentucky State's? Savannah State dropped down from Division I, from the MEAC Conference, where they were last year, to Division II for financial purposes. They left Division II in 1999 after a winning season in 98, and 98 would be the last time that Savannah State would have an above 500 season until this past year, when under the direction of first-year head coach and our coach of the year, Sean Quinn, they put together a 7-3 record, had the best record in the SIAC East. Obviously, unfortunately, they were not eligible to play in the SIAC championship game. That would have been an interesting game between them and Miles, to say the least. But it is a young team, and I knew going into the year that they were coming in with a new offense. All I heard was triple option. I didn't know it was going to be a pistol triple option, and they were also one of the most run-heavy teams in Division II in the SIAC, right there along with Kentucky State. And it was just a great year for Savannah State, and there's a lot of excitement for them in the future. They own the city of Atlanta, and they were the Georgia State champions. I think they beat any and everybody from the state of Georgia, I think, right?
Correct.
Yeah, they beat both teams from Atlanta. So a lot of positives there in the future for Coach Quinn and Savannah State. So That was story number 5. Anything you want to add on Savannah State there, AD?
No, we've already talked about him with him being our coach of the year and all the accolades that we gave him. So it's just kudos to him. You know, great job for Coach Quinn being able to having the guts to change up his offense. What they were doing was not working. Hadn't worked for 19 years. So,
yeah.
Hey, the worst thing that could happen is you have another 2-win season. So why not change it up?
Yeah, and I go back to the one of the biggest things he told me was he's admittedly a defensive guy. He brought in coaches that knew the triple option wing that offense from Georgia Southern, who knew that offense. And that, along with 2 offensive line coaches, goes to show that the attention to detail was there from the get-go, and it worked. It worked, and it should be paid attention to by a lot of coaches. And I know it's sometimes hard, but if you can do it, if you can do it the right way, I think Coach Quinn kind of really did a great job in doing that. All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to get into the games of the year, some of our HBCUs against PWIs, and then some of the intra-conference, interdivisional games that spotlighted the past year, and we're going to do that coming up out of this break. Thanks for listening to the BCSN SportsWrap with Bryan and AD. We'll be back right after these words.
It's like a loot machine. All around town, trying to get down. It's like a loot machine.
But you stay hard.